Good afternoon. We are now in our fourth chapter. And this one is entitled A Little Cloud. We were about to meet two men. Remember in Two Gallants it was Corley and Lenehan. Corley was the conquering lady killer and Lenehan was his sidekick. Well, in this one we're going to be in a somewhat similar situation. We begin with our character. He is now, we'll say, he's in his late or mid 30s. He's married. He has a child. So he's made some progress. From hanging out in a bar, having people buy him drinks and being a leech and wondering if his friend could conquer some young girl, to leading a pretty normal life. But he's thinking about his friend Gallagher, and he's almost envying him. Let's talk about envy. When do you envy somebody else? Well, it's okay to wish maybe you were this way or that way, but when you start envying somebody else for what they have that you don't, you've got an insecurity in yourself that you should deal with. And Chandler thinks that Gallagher has gotten on. He's traveled, he's well dressed, he's got talent, and he's done really well for himself. So Chandler immediately assumes that Gallagher's life is way better than his. On the other hand, he's about to meet Gallagher tonight in a bar he's never been to. And he's got this nickname, Little Chandler. He gives you the idea of being a little man. A little man. Okay. You can tell somebody they're little and maybe they're not. Maybe they're of average stature. Maybe they're bigger and stronger than you think they are. But he has a picture of himself as a little man, and it might not even extend to physical. It might be to his personality. He has a row of childish white teeth, so he somewhat looks childish. And he's got a desk job. It's not very exciting. He assumes that Gallagher, who has a newspaper job in London, leads a really glamorous, exciting life. He does not. He looks out the window of his office, and there's a shower of kindly golden dust, but it's showing on the untidy nurses, the decrepit old men, the children who are screaming. And so there's sort of a depressing reality that he's in. Remember, he's in Dublin, Gallagher is somewhere else, and melancholy overtakes him. This is his constant mood, melancholy. He's always sad. He remembers at home that he has a set of poetry books on his bookshelf, wonders if he could take one down and read it to his wife. But he's never done it. Why? Well, he's shy. So he's melancholy and he's shy. So, and the hour strikes, I guess it's 5 o'clock, and he decides to head out to the bar. Walks out into the street. The air is fairly sharp. The children are dirty, and they look like vermin or rats. There's a negativity to his environment. And he's about to go to somewhere where he's going to be out of place. He wants to forget his past, but he's going to have to remember it in a little bit. And he goes to this new bar that he's never been to. It's called Corliss's. And he's always walked past this place before and seen that the high-class ladies and men, or gallants, are in there. And he walks swiftly past it. He knows he's fearful of going in there. And he's going to go in there tonight. He has to. So he's on his way there. And he starts thinking about Gallagher and how he saw many signs of future greatness in his friend. He was wild, and yet he always had a bold face even when he was broke. For the first time in his life, he felt himself superior to the people he passed. That means previously he must have felt himself inferior to the people he passed. He crosses Grattan Bridge. He looks at the houses. They look stunted, held back, restricted. Could he write a poem to express his idea? Well, okay, we got to talk about this. Now, let's talk about a good singer. And I can sing, but I'm never going to be on the radio, and I'm never going to record a record or anything because I don't have that kind of talent. You know what talent is. It's something you've got. You either got it or you don't. You can work to develop it, but if you don't have the initial talent, then it's not going to pull off. And Chandler's wondering if he can do this. And the answer really is no, but he doesn't want to face that. Okay? Could he write something that would express his melancholy? Every step brought him nearer to London. Remember that London is east from Dublin. That's where Gallagher is. Everything good is in the east. He tried to weigh his soul to see if it was a poet's soul. Melancholy was the dominant note of his temperament. He's always sad. Most of the times he's sad. And sometimes he's resigned. Resigned means you've given up. Sometimes you got this simple joy in him. It's the rock and roll star fantasy. You envision yourself on the stage with the guitar, singing, and just wowing the crowd with what you're doing. He's having a rock and roll fantasy. And he's asking himself questions. Could he? Could he be popular? Could he sway a crowd? He invents sentences. He lets his fantasy really take a hold of him. He even changes his identity. He gives himself a poet's name, T. Malone Chandler. But he doesn't have the talent. Because he cannot overcome his emotions. One is melancholy, but the other is timidity. He's timid. His agitation overmasters him. He halts before the door of the bar. He's undecided about whether or not to go in. And he's worried when he walks in, and then he realizes nobody's looking at him. He's self-conscious. And he meets Gallagher and looks at him. And Gallagher is aging. His face is heavy. It's pale. He's clean-shaven, but his lips are long, shapeless, colorless. Ignatius Gallagher, though, has gotten on in life and done pretty well. But here comes some important stuff that Gallagher says. They begin to talk about Gallagher's job, and he says, press life really pulls you down. It's just not good, and it's good to be back in my home country. So the men have contrasting views right now. Chandler thinks everything wonderful is in the East in London. Gallagher is glad that he's back in Dublin, where he can recharge himself and re-energize. The two men are drinking whiskey, and Chandler and Gallagher have contrasting drinking styles. Gallagher belts his down straight. Chandler puts water in his to dilute it, and doesn't even drink that much. They begin to talk about their friends from the past, and they talk about how some of them have gone to the dogs, they've gone downhill. This one, that one. But Gallagher says to Chandler, you haven't changed a bit. You're still the same person that tried to lecture me on Sunday mornings when I had a sore head and fur on my tongue. Apparently Chandler would advise Gallagher, and on Sunday morning Gallagher had a sore head and his fur on his tongue because he had a hangover. And Chandler's probably lecturing him about you shouldn't be drinking so much. They are contrasting drinkers. Gallagher belts his down, Chandler sips his. And Gallagher begins to talk about Paris. Again, a city in the East. There's no city like it for gaiety, movement, excitement. Again, everything wonderful is in the East. He's been to the Bohemian cafes, great stuff. And he says, Tommy, you're too pious. You wouldn't do well there. Chandler thinks there's something vulgar in his friend. And he maybe got it because of the competition in the press. But the charm is still there, even though he's got a gaudy manner. But Gallagher really liked Paris. He says they believe in everything, enjoying life especially. And we know Chandler would definitely be out of place there. Gallagher's seen some of the life on the continent too. He says, immorality is everywhere. It's even among the clergy at times. And we're reminded that if you think something is only good somewhere else, or think it happens somewhere else, you can probably find it happening right in your backyard. So, all right. But Chandler judges Paris an immoral city. And then Gallagher kind of reproves Tommy. He's pouring too much water into his alcohol. He says, don't make punch out of it. Drink it straight. Gallagher's smoking a cigar. And he tells his friend about pictures of corruption he's seen on the continent, even among the clergy in religious houses. Gallagher doesn't think that Dublin is dull. Again, Chandler's still got this idea that Dublin is a dull, not very exciting place. And Gallagher says, yeah, but it's good to be here. It's really relaxing. to be back in the home country. And now they get to begin to talk about Chandler's personal life. Now, at some point, you're going to meet maybe 10, 15 years from now, and well, how you doing? You'll say, well, I'm married, you have 2 kids. Oh, that's great. You'll shake hands. That's wonderful, okay? You should be proud of that. Chandler is embarrassed that he's married. He's embarrassed that he has a child. He's almost ashamed of it. He's not proud of this at all. And so Chandler invites Gallagher to his home. And he's sure that his wife would be delighted to see Gallagher. Well, Gallagher says, well, I'm leaving tomorrow. And Chandler says, oh, really? Well, you can't make it? Yeah. And I'll visit you the next time when I come along. Sure. Okay, well, I bet it isn't going to happen. Also, Gallagher says that being married must get a little bit stale at times. So he more or less insults Chandler's relationship. So now Chandler has to have another drink, pushes himself to take it. He's getting a little bored of this meeting. He's getting warm. He's getting excited. The whiskey's gone to his head. He's confused. He doesn't drink very much. He's lost his poise. He's sensitive. He's a bit upset. And he has, under the influence of alcohol, what we can call an epiphany. He was sure he could do something better than his friend. What was it that stood in his way? His unfortunate timidity. So the truth has emerged. He's realized he's just too timid to take a chance and do what he wants to do with his life. And he knows that his friend has refused his invitation, and he knows his friend is just being nice, and so it's never going to happen. So Chandler comes back on him and says, well, when are you going to get married? And Gallagher says, well, I want to see some life first. I mean to marry, but I want to marry a woman with a bank account that won't, she's got to be rich. And I'll find one of these women in the East, especially among the European women, the French women, the Jewish women. Those are the ones that have all the money. Those are the ones I want to marry. But then right at the end, as I already said, Gallagher pronounces on Chandler's marriage. He says, must get a bit stale. And we're about to see Chandler's marriage and find out it is a bit stale. There's a break in the story, and here's little Chandler, and he's in his wife's doghouse right now. 1, he was in a bar, and he's a little tipsy. 2, he forgot to bring home the tea or the sugar or the coffee he said he was going to get, and so his wife has had to go out and get it for him. Guys, don't do this. Okay? And so she's gone out. The child is sleeping, and she put the child in his arms and said, don't wake him. Now, that's not a suggestion. That's not a request. That's a command. So with his child in his arms, he begins to walk about the apartment. He looks at his wife's photograph, and he sees that she's got these thin, tight lips. She's got a pale summer blouse on that he gave her, and we go to him buying the blouse. He's in the shop. He's in the ladies section. Very self-conscious, very embarrassed, very worried somebody's going to see him doing this, to buy the blouse for his wife. He brought it home, and she kisses him, and he kissed him, says it's pretty, says it's stylish, but she hears the price, throws it on the table, and says it's a swindle. She tries it on, is delighted with it, kissed him. He was good to think of her. Okay, ladies, I have to give you a life lesson here. I do this every year. At some point, your guy's going to give you a clothing gift. So I'm going to talk about the guy first. If you are going to give your wife a clothing gift, make sure you've done your homework. Take a look at what she likes to wear. Make sure you get the size right. Check the labels for her size. And make sure you get the right color. You'll get a sense of this if you're paying attention, so pay attention. Women, when he hands you this gift, just do the following. Open it, smile. Kiss him and say thank you. If you like it, you can show it. If you don't, say you like it anyway. And you can take it, oh, this is wonderful. Then you put it aside. Remember, you can always return it. And if he's smart, he'll have the receipt just in case he didn't write. So guys, get the receipt and you'll be home free. But this woman's reaction, She kisses him, says it's pretty and stylish. Here's the price, throws it on the table. Says it's a swindle. Not a lot of points here. Now he walks to a different photo of her and he looks at it. Yes, she's pretty, but her eyes are cold and there's something mean in her face. And those eyes irritate him and repel him. And he thinks about what Gallagher said about the Jewish women and the Oriental women. He begins to look around his apartment, the furniture. She chose it. And it reminds him of her, but it's prim, it's pretty, but it's kind of like her. And he's getting a resentment in his life. And he doesn't like this. It awakes. Can he get out of this little house? The furniture has to be paid for. So he can't break free from his responsibilities. He begins to resent his life. There's a book of Byron's poems on the table. It's open. Now we got to talk about George Gordon, Lord Byron. We didn't do him when we did the Romantic Poets, but he was the Romantics poet romantic. He did everything he wanted to. He was totally free. Didn't believe in exclusive marriage. Didn't believe in anything. Did whatever he wanted to. Basically a wild man. And he lived the life of the Romantic poet. Well, that's a definite contrast to Chandler's life. So I guess Byron is like Gallagher, or Gallagher is like Byron. Chandler is not like Byron or Gallagher. The completely free man, the little Chandler is the completely unfree man. And he starts asking himself these questions. Could he too write like this, express the melancholy of his soul in verse? Well, the answer is no. Now, we might have a great tennis player in the class, and if I squared off with you to play tennis, you'd probably clean my clock. I don't have any talent, and Chandler does not have any poetic talent. He's not a poet. He's a desk guy at a desk job. And then the child begins to awake, and then the child begins to cry, and he can't get it to be quiet. He rocks it, he reads the second stanza of a poem, but it's useless. He can't read, and he's frustrated. He can't do anything. It's useless. He's a prisoner in his own life. His arms tremble with anger and he yells to the child, "Stop!" When he does that, the dominoes fall really fast. The child begins to cry. Then it begins to scream. And he cannot quiet it. And at the high point of its screaming, guess what? The door opens and who is it? It's his wife. Hears the mother's voice and really starts to cry. And he says, "It's not that bad, it's nothing." And she takes the child from him and says, "What have you done?" And glares at him. He sustains her gaze and his heart closes. He sees that she hates him. And now we get to the end, because she picks up the baby and begins to walk about with it and say the following, "My little man, my little Manny." And Chandler is left feeling terrible remorse and he's crying. What's significant about the ending? Who do you think told Chandler he was a little person? Where did he learn to believe that he was a little man? Well, probably from the family he grew up in. And now this cycle of the male person being told he's little is going to be perpetuated by the woman who's saying to this baby, "My little man, my little Manny." And so the next boy will go into the world believing he's a little man, even though he's probably not a little man. For all we know, Chandler could be 6'8", 350. But you can still see yourself as small, even though you're large. Again, and maybe he's 4 feet tall and 110 pounds. Either way, that's his attitude about himself and his life. The next chapter is my favorite, Ivy Day in the committee room.